Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast, or welcome back to it. I'm Allistair McCaw. In this episode of What It Takes, I'll be talking to Ben Ryan. Now, the man needs little introduction, but for some of you who aren't maybe familiar with his work, he's most well known for leading the Fiji 7's rugby team to Olympic gold in 2016 in Rio. He also consults numerous teams and athletes around the globe, and he's also a podcast host, the Ben Ryan podcast, which is a great listen, guys, so make sure you check out that one. But in this podcast with Ben, I actually tried to veer away from talking too much about the Fiji experience, because even though it was a phenomenal achievement, if you look on Google or YouTube Ben Ryan or Fiji 7's, there is hundreds of interviews and articles about it. So I tried to use this valuable time to ask him more about leadership, how he built a winning culture, what the challenges were in coaching, what the challenges are he sees moving forward. There was also some great questions from you guys out there as well. For example, one was, if he was in Eddie Jones' coaching team, what would he change? What would he do differently? How he defined success. What were some of the biggest learning points in his career, failures, successes, for example. How he has the hard conversations. He shares a little bit of his experience of working with different players, what he saw in the good to great players, and so much more. Also, as I mentioned, leadership as well. I asked him what he looked for in a captain and what great leadership qualities were. So, as always, guys, I appreciate your feedback. Thanks so much to all of you who have left a rating or review on iTunes. Also, remember that the podcast is available through my website, allistairmccaw.com, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. So that's enough rambling from me. Let's get into this one. Enjoy it. It's Ben Ryan. Ben, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast. It's a great pleasure to have you finally.
No, it's brilliant, Allistair. I think the last time we met was at Paris Saint-Germain.
Correct.
Gosh, how long ago was that?
I think it must have been 2019, and I think it was April 2019. But of course, time at the moment, 2020 just feels like it didn't exist. But I remember I arrived on the first day of the conference and came in, and you were speaking, and was just blown away by your presentation. Obviously, on the success with the Fiji Rugby team, or the 7's rugby team, and so on, and obviously your book as well. So it wasn't a bad way to come into a conference and listen to you.
Well, it's very, very kind of you to say so, and I guess I enjoy talking about performance and culture and the stuff that perhaps we don't measure, and so it kind of gets put to one side, but is the difference between good and great, really.
Let me start with this. Do you get tired of talking about that experience? I mean, I'm sure everybody that you run into wants to know about it. Do you get I suppose it's I compare it almost to, I was in Las Vegas a few years ago for a basketball conference, and Journey were playing, the group, which is one of my favorite bands. I just, and I obviously heard the song Don't Stop Believing, and I thought, how many times have these guys, and they still bring the passion. And It must be the same for you, talking about that experience.
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, I was talking about this with my partner, Michelle, only this morning when we were having a walk down the river. And I'm very keen to kind of, in the nicest way possible, put Fiji in my rearview mirror, because I do enjoy, I think once I get into it, I enjoy telling the stories and talking about my time in Fiji and how it's guided me in a lot of the stuff I'm doing now. But I want to get stuck into talk more about what I'm doing now, and also what my future might look like, I suppose. But but at the same time, not there's plenty of people that haven't heard it, and I do enjoy telling it. But yeah, you're right. I think I don't want to be known as just he's the one that's got that story about Fiji. You kind of hope that there's well, you never know, that may well have been my summit, and it's all downhill. But you kind of hope that there's more chapters.
So let's actually just start with how the past 12 months have been for you. The past year, obviously with COVID and so on. The last time the last time we saw each other was in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Just at the Rugby 7's, and you were with the TV crew there.
Yeah, I was with TV, and then I was ambassador for HSBC, and also doing a little bit of work with the French national team that were there, and that was almost one of the kind of last. I think I went to Vancouver the week after to do some stuff there, but I was doing stuff with LA, and that was a cool tournament, and I really enjoy Rugby 7's as far as 16 teams fly around the world, go to one spot like LA for 2 days, and then the twists and turns of a tournament that quickly unfolds. And as a coach, is super exciting because you get the highs and the lows. You've got to react really quickly. You've got to have that thing between decision making on the field and problem solving as a coach, and it's such an amazing tool to learn to gain experience and just get better as a coach.
Yeah, I mean, if I can remember correctly, obviously it was in Los Angeles, and then the week later, as you mentioned, in Vancouver. I think the Vancouver tournament was indoors, wasn't it? So it was like a completely different climate and everything, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And so again, that kind of adds to that. I was having this conversation with a football coach yesterday. That you can do things like a recipe like off a website where you follow it by the letter, but really you hope you're a bit more like a chef. You can dip in and add things and take stuff away. And I've heard that analogy a few times, but in 7's it's also very relevant because you go from Vegas, and there's a little bit of travel. You might still be hanging on to a bit of jet lag from wherever you've come from initially, and then you're indoors. You're also I've been to Vancouver where we trained in the snow and then gone indoors, and the week before you've been in LA where it certainly wasn't snowing. And you've got a different group of players. You've got a week of what you've just done and your highs and lows, and it becomes a great challenge. So I think when you're in the maelstrom of it, you're in the day to day. When you step away from it, you realise just how valuable it's been as a tool for you to develop as a coach.
Yeah, I know we've completely veered off the first question, but just while we're on that, I do miss Las Vegas, the tournament that was obviously there the year before, and then they changed it to Los Angeles. So, but luckily I was able to get the last edition of Las Vegas because it was always on my bucket list to see Las Vegas 7's, and then that was the last year, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Las Vegas was such a unique place for us to go as a professional sports team because, you're there as an Olympic sport, but you're staying in a hotel that's got a casino in the bottom that's pumping oxygen into your room that's got no clocks, where training facilities for rugby aren't really there, but they've got some great performance centres. And then you're going into the desert to play this tournament over 3 days. And it's got very unique demands and challenges going to that leg of the tournament. I mean, with Fiji in my first year with them, there's guys that had never got on a plane before, and then they're going to Vegas. You can imagine how that blows your mind when I can tell you how many escalators there are in Fiji, and yet you go to Vegas and it's just
mind-boggling.
And actually there's one really interesting story that might resonate with you, that on the first night in my first year there, with the team, I wanted to check they were all where they should be in their rooms, and I went to each room. I went to the first room and knocked on their door to just say good night, and there was no one in the room. And I was like, oh no. Second room, no one in the room. And I thought, no, we've already lost these Fijians to Vegas before the tournament began. And I got to the last room, and they had all moved all their mattresses into that one room, and they were all sleeping in that one room, and they felt safe there. And I, yeah, I thought that was quite really interesting about just culturally, that's what they wanted to do. Coming to this big city where actually they didn't want to suddenly get lost into the strip of Vegas. They wanted to stay together and tight because that's what they knew and that's what they valued.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy there. Vegas is just another world. I mean, I remember seeing the players coming back into the hotel or leaving early in the morning for practice, and people are still there from the night before on slot machines, and it's just like a bizarre type of world, and it's always, you don't know if it's night or day when you're in those places, indoors,
Yeah, that's it. We used to have a bit of fun with England actually when I was coach at Vegas, that before training, particularly if it was like we're getting over jet lag and everyone's a bit tired, we'd go down to the casino. We would have had an award for someone that's done something well, and we'd give them like a $5 or $10 chip. And we'd all go down to the roulette wheel together just before we were getting on the bus, and say, look, here you go, just pick a number, And so the team were all there as a guy would put on, a red 9 and watch it whirl round, and 99% of the time it just landed and that was it. But it was quite a nice way of getting the team together, and occasionally it landed, and so everyone suddenly elated, a bit of dopamine, and off they go and get into the bus. And I'm not saying that the gambling in any way is the answer to unlocking potential. It was just a fun way to do it and embrace Vegas in a very small way, without getting carried away.
I'm surprised the tabloids or the Sun didn't get hold of that and say, look at Ben Ryan and the England team. They hit Vegas and they're straight at the slot machines. But getting back to the very first question, Ben, how has the last 12 months been for you, and what's been the biggest challenge for you?
I think at the start, if I'm totally honest, it was actually having the honesty to say I quite enjoy this. I'm sure we travel a lot. And I think for the last 15 years, I've been out of the country at least probably a third of the year. And so to be at home, spend time with Michelle and do stuff locally, and do the things that you want to do, read the books you want to read, listen to the podcasts, that was really nice. And then it kind of just hit that frustrating kind of time where you can't do your work. Most of my consultancy stuff is overseas, or certainly includes travel. And so you try to do it through, here, what we're doing now, Zoom and Skype and things like that. It's not the same. You can do some planning, you can do some strategy, but it certainly didn't feel like I was really like adding the value that I'd like to think I can add when I'm there. And that continued really. And then the uncertainty around planning became a real stressful point, both for the people that I work with on different levels. So, for example, for some people, they're hoping that some events actually happen, whereas for others, say professional football, you've got a back-to-back season where they had 12 days almost between the two seasons. I know coaches that have had less than 2 weeks off in 2 seasons now. And, they're on their knees at the moment as we're approaching the end of a very important season. And then, so it's just extremes. And hopefully now we're starting to be able to see some planning. And I guess maybe it's shown to me how important I value, knowing where I'm trying to get to. If you're not sure where your path is taking you in the next 6 to 9 months because of COVID and everything else, it caused me quite a lot of stress and worried nights, because you suddenly feel a bit rudderless. So it's trying to put all that into perspective.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you're not. If I'm right here, you're not coaching anymore. You're not working with a specific team. But you are consulting. You're still doing TV work. So is that what keeps you busy these days?
Yeah, I mean, very little TV really. It's more, it's consultancy. I mean, I work on different levels really. I have my own consultancy, so I'll do things from an organisational review to mentoring, and everything in between really. I also work for UK Sport, so I'm an independent consultant for UK Sport. So they look after all the summer and winter Olympic sports. And going as an independent I've pretty much done everything in the last 4 years really, from being in an investment panel to decide this is how many medals that this sport thinks that they can achieve at the next Olympics, testing that out. And then attaching some funding to it, that recommendations that they can go to board, or it might be a walk the floor with a sports where you actually spend time embedded with a team or sport and a deep dive, and I love it. I see some common stuff across everything, but I also see some amazing practitioners and athletes. So I do that. I do some work with Nike as a consultant as well, for Nike Explore, which is a group that's based around football. And I'm a consultant for different teams really across different sports, and then also in my role with HSBC, I work both within their businesses and also in ambassadorial work. Takes me to different things. So kind of in a nutshell, I guess that's it. And then occasionally, you get phone calls with interesting projects that you pick up, like unfounded Rugby X, which is an indoor version of rugby, which we launched at the O2 a couple of years ago. And we've had to delay the last couple of events, but that was brilliant. Quite stressful to try to sell out the O2 with an event that we didn't have any video footage. You couldn't really tell people exactly what it was, but we still managed to get, I think 93% capacity, and think that was really exciting as a kind of being part of a new version of the sport. So yeah, a few things like that really, Allistair.
Sounds like you've been keeping busy. We've got a few questions from some people on social media, and that just links me to the next question. It's from Kelvin. Asks, will Ben return to coaching full time? Is that in your future plans?
I think it depends what you regard as coaching. If you regard it as being on the field day to day as a kind of a traditional lead coach in rugby, I'm not sure if I will. And I think for a number of reasons, like I enjoyed what I did with 7's. Initially, when I came back, I had some options to come into the bigger game 15-a-side. I just didn't want to do it. I wasn't really ready. I wanted to do a number of things and also just have some time out. And then there's been, the last couple of years, there's been one or two where I thought I'd be a great fit. But it didn't work out. And I started to get involved in other sports, and where my passion is beginning to really, where it lies now is around a role that probably actually doesn't exist. So it's around making sure that the athletes are at their best every day. But I'm not talking about just from a physical point of view or just from a mental point of view. It's overseeing it, so that bandwidth across. So making sure that everyone's at their best, that coaches are feeling fresh, that you're supporting coaches. So you don't want coaches to leave, you want high retention rates. So individual player development, understanding and overseeing culture. But, it's a bit wordy to say, director of culture or head of culture or performance. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But it's those small things that I think is needed that you can't put actually into a job description. But I think you'll see positions starting to appear at elite level that is around the traditionally the things that can't get measured that easily, which is, those things it talks about, how good relationships are within the team, how much people are sticking to the values that they've agreed and the behaviours. What's the culture look like, and can it give you any clues to what your performance might look like on the Saturday, and if there's various interventions that you can do to try to get you back on track, all that sort of stuff. I've been doing more and more with, and I think I'll end up in a role around that with a team. That's what I think.
So, for example, when you worked with obviously England 7's, and you worked with Fiji, or even your consulting teams, for example, and they say, help us with our culture. Where do you start there, Ben? So when you walk into a team, where do you start with helping a team's culture?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll do is I'll do a kind of an MOT where I'll just look around and talk to people and see what's going on the floor. So, as you know, people will tell you about their culture, but actually seeing it on a day-to-day, talking with people and understanding it, then you start to drive towards where you think they could make some changes. And it's not just about, I kind of use the analogy that, the norm is like most people like to feel like they're part, they have belonging, and they like to be liked. And they might do that above wanting self-improvement. So, to take a simple example, when I was a kid, you want to do some extra kicking practice after school in the evenings, but all your mates want to go to the pub. To do that decision as an individual makes you feel a bit isolated, and is also a tougher one to take. And actually, like, as a culture, you want the opposite. You want that big group to be the ones that are all doing that extra practice, because that's the norm. And so it's how you drive to that. Have some guiding principles around, okay, you go in, you have a look, you talk to people about what they want. So what is their goal? Is it to win the Premier League? Okay. If you want to win the Premier League, then what sort of athletes, what sort of coaches, what sorts of team do you need to achieve that? And then you start to have a look at values. I'm not a big fan of having too many values. I actually kind of like just having one, and having all the behaviours from that. And then it's tying all the little bits together. So it's making sure that everyone's on the same page, whether it's your physical, your conditioners or your psychs or your coaches. And sometimes it gets lost a little bit. I mean, let's take Premier League football at the moment. They're playing a game every 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Some of which is overseas in Europe and some is at home. Really, all they're doing is playing, recovering, travelling, playing, recovering, and that's it. And if you're not careful, then what gets lost is, in that, with lots of changes, people are getting dropped, people are getting selected, and those conversations perhaps aren't wrapped around that. And you can lose players at this point, and you can look back as a coach going, actually, I haven't had a decent conversation with this guy for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And somebody that can see that and can start mopping it up and adding that clarity and helping people take some of that weight off their shoulders, I think is really important to keep that consistency as a culture, because otherwise you will end up having blind spots.
So Ben, what are some of the non-negotiables for you when working with the team? So standards, if you like.
I think I would kind of reverse back a stage and I'd go, anything that you want to put in as a non-negotiable, I call them guardrails. So if you imagine, like, every team operates within a box, and that the box, the walls of those boxes are your guardrails, but they have to be agreed. So as a coach, or if I'm there as a performance director and the head coach says, right, this is the timings and this is the consequences if you're late or you do, if the players haven't agreed that, then you're not going to get the ownership of that, and it's those guardrails aren't going to be very strong. And so anything that they do, you have to explain why you're doing it, and they have to agree it, and then there's that connection. So, why is it important? And it sounds silly, but why is it important to be on time? And so you have to connect, and the players have to understand that, because it sounds such a simple thing, but I have seen it in elite sport where actually they're a bit too flexible on their timings, and it means that, I don't know, the really crucial part of the warm-up, which might be taking shots at goal just before, to sharpen your shooting skills as a striker just before you're about to go on the field. You don't get to do it because they've come to the training session late. That then affects your performance. So everything has to be agreed and then the guardrails. And then once they're agreed, then you have to make sure that you consistently apply them. So I think my non-negotiables is consistency once those guardrails are being put into place.
So when it goes about building the culture or deciding on the values and standards for the team, do you include everybody in that process, the players and everybody?
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, exactly. I just don't think it works where it comes from on high and it's like, okay, like, right, these are our values. Like, it's always the same ones as well. Normally, people say trust and honesty. Yeah.
That's the same five.
Yeah, and it's always done in pre-season where everyone's got time and they sit round in a room, blah, 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 and they have them all. They don't then perhaps attach behaviours that can be measured. So they don't think, okay, respect is up there on our wall. We've plastered it on our wall at our training ground, in our changing room and everything else. But if you're late for a physio's appointment, there is both that should be measured, but also the conversation should be directed towards that value. Like, okay, you're disrespecting the medical staff because you're late. They've got a busy schedule. You're disrespecting the people that are before and after you. Do you understand that? And do you realise the consequences of your actions? So you kind of can also take it away from I'm not talking about to you directly, Allistair. I'm talking about the value and not adhering to it. And I think we get lost in just dealing with it, and then it's never a living document. It's done at the beginning. So that's why I think don't have too many of them, and really make sure that it's very pertinent to that individual group of people. But it has to involve everybody. And I think if you do that well, then you get a connectivity around your value, and then that drives a far more lasting culture.
Yeah, I remember going back to what you were saying there. I remember consulting a pretty large university here in the United States. It was either where was it? It was in Alabama, I think it was. Not Alabama itself. The college was in Alabama, the state.
Yeah.
And driving into the facility, I could already tell what culture they had. And it was something simple as the athletes were walking down to the field, 2 or 3 of them with no shirt on, which, okay, fine, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It wouldn't be in my standards, to be honest.
Yeah, not mine.
But anyway, in front of them is the athletic trainer. She was probably around about 4'8", carrying both of the Gatorade buckets. You could see that she could hardly pick them up. With the guys behind them, one on his phone, the other two, monkeying around and so on and so forth. And I already saw the culture right there.
Yeah.
And went into, watched practice, as you said, observe a lot, just observe. Went into the team room, the facilities, beautiful as they are here in the States at some of these colleges. It's just ridiculous. And on the wall, respect, teamwork, all these things. And I was thinking, didn't see that. And I confronted, obviously, the coach after it and said, here's the honest truth here. I didn't see much respect. Nobody greets anybody in the hallways. The locker rooms are an absolute pigsty. And obviously the teamwork, where's that? When the trainer has to carry everything down, and so already you could just see the toxicity in the culture there.
That's a brilliant example, Allistair, and I think it for me that I resonate hugely with that, because you understand the connection between those guys not helping that trainer carry the stuff, because ultimately it will affect their performance. Those guys behind obviously haven't got that, or they've got a blind spot, or they're so concerned in what they're doing themselves, they're not thinking about the rest of the team. And I think that's part of this kind of, again, going back to that, a role that doesn't really exist at the moment, but someone that spots that, because even in good cultures, there'll be moments where stress gets too much and they will drop. And it's about, we always said with the Fijian team, if we don't win a gold medal, it's not because of dropping a ball or missing a tackle in the final. It's something you didn't do 6 months earlier. Mm-hmm. And when a team, the penny drops for organisations that understand that and connect that, then you would have walked in and you would have seen a totally different scenario. I did it this week. There's a great boxing coach that is a mate of mine called Angel Fernandez. He's one of the coaches with Anthony Joshua. I went in to see his group of boxers, and socially distant flies. We did the socially distanced elbows and stuff. Every single one came in, said hello, was very, very polite. Immediately, everything was tidy. Everyone was. You could tell straight away their culture was on the right tracks. You got it for 30 seconds now. It goes back to that. Well, okay, what are you? I can't put a number on that. It's not like a GPS unit that's giving me any feedback, but I can tell you that I think is a great sign towards what they're trying to achieve. And yeah, so I think, I find all of this so fascinating, because I think it's evolving. It's the kind of next thing really in elite sport and in corporate, and even from just a purely financial point of view, you want staff to be retained, and because turnover costs money to change people and advertise and pay out people, and staff are going to be retained if they're happy coming into work every day and they feel valued and all of those things. Because they'll also be their best version, and if you've hired the right people, you get the right results. So even purely from a fiscal point of view, it makes sense to really put more focus on this.
Yeah, I think one good example, when I visited Glasgow Rangers beginning of last year, just before the lockdown, and obviously Stephen Gerrard was there, obviously with Michael Beale and the team there as well. I was speaking to the performance team that day, and I felt their culture pretty much as I came in the gate as well, of why Stephen has been successful. I mean, obviously his leadership qualities of being a great captain as well, leads by example, not a man of many words. But sitting in the reception, I was made to feel welcome. People said hello. The receptionist struck up a chat with me, which made me feel comfortable, because I was a little bit nervous. I'll be honest. I still get, in these type of places. People say hello in the corridors. The place was immaculate, and you just see why some teams succeed, why some leaders have it together, and just why other places don't. And getting back to this university I visited, the facilities were just second to none. I mean, the signage in the team room must have cost probably $10,000 to do with respect and teamwork and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But there was absolutely none of it in action. So fascinating.
It's crazy, isn't it, Allistair? It's like I saw the same in a big sport over here, Olympic sport, that have got aims to win lots of medals in Tokyo. And a simple question. I said, what do you think? How's your culture? And they said, oh, great, new gym, painted it recently, got all this new equipment, and I thought, they're in trouble here.
Yeah, exactly. I was listening to your podcast, the Ben Ryan podcast, which is brilliant. I actually binged on it. I think I listened to all your episodes in about 3 days on my my runs.
You're the one that listens to it then.
No, it's excellent, great job, and I really recommend everybody out there to listen to Ben's podcast, Ben Ryan podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, you were having a conversation. I can't remember who it was with, but it was regards Fabio Capello, and we were talking about standards and being too autocratic and so on and so forth. Could you relay that story to us? I think it was about the ketchup or the tomato, or as you say there, the tomato sauce, and in terms of some people coming in and saying these are my rules and why that isn't working today.
Yeah, it was a conversation I was having with Tom Fordyce, who ghostwrote my book actually, and I went to university with, and he's a great journalist and has done, spent a lot of time with people doing their autobiographies, and talked about Fabio, how when he came as the England head coach, he made some changes on. He wanted to he was more into sports science, but more without the personal touch. So he said, right, no tomato ketchup. And so all these players that he hadn't connected to it and said why, he just did it, and they felt put out because they didn't think it makes the big difference. And then they were also then seeing that he he was Italian, with an Italian staff he'd brought in. None of them had made an effort to learn English or interact with the players. They would go home to Italy as quickly as they could in between things. And so with one hand he's asking them. He's been very autocratic and dictatorial, and then on the other, he's not actually leading by example by buying into the group and being part of that. And I think it goes back again to going, it wasn't about the tomato ketchup. It was about them wanting to have better standards, and that's your start point in having a conversation. And I mean, it's a pretty cool start point. You can grab a player if you talk about tomato ketchup at the start, and it leads to an engaging conversation. But if you don't have that and you don't connect, then all the players are thinking is, this guy's coming, he's not making an effort to really engage with us, and he's just telling us what to eat and what not to eat. It's like, I'm not having this, and immediately it caused silos within the group, and he wasn't very successful. And I'm not saying he wasn't very successful because he stopped them having tomato ketchup, but it kind of shows you how his mind was thinking, and that he lacked the understanding to get those softer skills across. They
call it ketchup gate.
Ketchup gate.
Yeah, not allowing ketchup at the in the restaurant, and apparently there were stories of players smuggling it in and so on and so forth. Some funny stuff, but yeah, that was really interesting to listen to on your podcast about that, about Also, just the division between the staff and the players. With, like you said, the culture of the Italians, which would have their espressos in the morning and be in one corner of the room, and the players in the other, and so on. It's actually something I do as well, and I could talk to you for hours about this and share notes, and that's why I love your podcast, because I'm learning from you as well. But going into a team that I observed, it was actually out in San Diego, where the American 7's are based.
Yeah.
And with Mike Friday, of course, he was also on the podcast as well. And it was a team I was consulting there as well. But the second day, I noticed that everybody at breakfast and lunch all basically hung with the same people, sat at the same tables. And there was these cliques, there was the senior players at the one table, there was the newbies at the other table, and that's something where I thought, no, that's exactly what creates cliques in a group, is those small things of, it's always the same people in the same places, and that's something that I wanted to, I spoke to the coach about and said, let's get the senior players mixing with the juniors, because they've got to learn and they've got to be mentored about our culture and so on and so forth. But just those small things.
Well, and I think again, without wanting to labour the point, if they're just told, like, you guys have got to mix more, they'll be like, well, why? What's in it for me? But if you actually understand, well, look, there might be a crucial moment in a game where there's a bit more understanding required, or when you're put under the pump and the pressure comes on from outside, and you've got to be tight as a group, and you've already got silos within that group, you're going to be less likely to be able to react positively to that. And I've seen it, like the penny does drop for players. For example, telephones. It's a big issue in professional sport and social media, and having your phone literally with you all the time. And I've had it where they've, I've been in one organisation where they said, right, they're making all the players stay after practice to have a meal together in the meal hall, so that we can build team and culture. And I went into the meal hall, and they were all there, but they were all on their phones. No one was talking to each other. It's like, so what's the point? And if you just have that understanding that, hey, don't be on your phone for a half an hour or a day before a game, you might actually have a really interesting conversation with one of your teammates that might suddenly solve something that you're going to go and face, the following day on the field. But if they don't see the value in that, and they haven't understood it and they haven't agreed to it, then you're never going to get that stickability. And I think that goes back to Fabio Capello's tomato ketchup. You have to involve everybody. And that takes some softer skills for coaches, and it takes alignment, and that is one of the magical words that we have in elite sport, creating alignment, which so much about, and it's so valuable.
I love that this conversation has gone to culture, because I'm doing my best not to ask you any questions on Fiji Rugby, because
thank you.
If anybody out there wants to know, he's got a fantastic book. He's all over YouTube. You can find out about the Fiji experience and the journey, which is pretty fascinating. So I love that we're going culture leadership.
Hey, look, and I don't mind. Obviously, I'm really proud of what happened in Fiji, and I love talking about the Fijians and how strongly their culture is for them. How important it is for them, and how it can really help them in things like rugby sevens. And I learnt loads off the players and off the guys I work with in the management that were Fijian, because they put it so highly above everything else. And a few key things that they just how they put other people first. Our value, which was Vela Mani, which I've got tattooed on my wrist. Our one value that we had, and Vela Mani is a very old Fijian word, and it means work together, love each other. And we lived by that value. And it drove all our behaviours, and it drove any conversations where our behaviours weren't up to where we wanted them to be. But you would see, that the players, without asking, that we'd get off a flight somewhere, and you just turn around, you see the boys taking other people that were on the flight, taking their bags off the carousel. We had two suspected heart attacks on a flight once, just as the stewardesses were delivering lunch. and that, they were flapping and really stressing about it. And our boys, without asking, they just got up and said, "Hey, look, you guys deal with this. We'll deliver the food." And so they went around the plane giving out the chicken or fish, but they didn't think about it, and they didn't then do the whole social media. This is it, or social media. Look, take a picture of me as I'm cleaning out the changing room. And I've seen that happen. And I think that's another thing to understand. Your culture's going well when you hear these stories and they don't seek for them to be public. They just get on with them. I think I learned so much in Fiji about how important putting person at the center is.
Yeah, just talking about that one. Obviously, now the All Blacks, with regards their principles as well. But I was working with the U.S. Paralympic soccer team. I got a phone call from the coach. They were in Rio, obviously, and he said, "You won't believe what just happened." He said, "This is what our culture is about." They were helping other teams offload their equipment from their buses and their vans and stuff. And there's culture in motion right there. Nobody asked them to. They had some good leaders in the group as well. So come, let's go. We've got our stuff in a hotel. Let's go help the other teams. And that made me smile from ear to ear. I mean, could not be happier. And nobody like you said, Ben, the little things run into each other. You know what I mean? It's not you saying, right, when we get there, you have to help other people. When you do this, it's just the kindness starts to gather momentum.
Yeah, and I don't know about, I think I do know about you, because I'm sure we're on the same page about that. This, and I say this all the time, people must get bored of it. I don't see teams failing because someone's not put on a GPS unit, turned it on, off, or whatever, the battery's gone flat. But I do see it when relationships break down in teams or there's a disconnect with things. And these things are hard to measure. So, I know coaches and I know owners of that don't give a shit about those things that we're just talking about, but they don't understand team culture and performance. They don't realize that actually, you actually can have short-term success in a very toxic environment. It's possible, and you can be a toxic coach, and you can have great success in the short term, but it will never last, and you'll just create a cycle where it will come back and bite you. And so. Yeah, that's why for me, I think it's above everything. You get that right, it just has a ripple effect of, so many other things.
Let's go to something I like to ask all leaders, and it's an area that a lot of leaders have the most difficulty in, or where they feel the most comfortable in, is having the hard conversations, tough conversations, difficult, whatever you want to call them. What was your approach to having the hard conversations? For example, having to drop a player or tell a player he or she's not been selected. How did you approach those?
Yeah, and I think how I approached it as 22-year-old, 23-year-old teacher to a mid-40s coach was very different, because I think as I started my journey as a coach, I wanted to be liked, and so you sometimes veer away from giving people too much criticism, negative stuff, because you want them to like you, or you might give them too much slack. So if they've gone outside of what we've agreed, you might turn a blind eye because you want that person to like you, and you learn as a coach that those things that doesn't work doing it like that, and you're getting away really from your core values, and so as I moved through, I very quickly understood that. You can put an arm around someone if you're delivering bad news or they've done something wrong. But if they've done something wrong, you shouldn't protect someone from the consequences of their actions. And from the selection question, if I'm talking to you and I'm giving you bad news that I've not selected you for the Olympic Games, it shouldn't come as a surprise for that conversation, because I've given you all the information consistently all the way through on what you need to do, on where you are. And so when that final conversation comes, you kind of know what's happening, you know it anyway. And always tell the coaches that I work with, never lie to somebody, never use an excuse to hang a selection on, like say, oh, you know what, I think you're just not quite fit enough, for compared with Jack that I picked, because that kid's going to go back, he's going to check all of his data, he's going to go to see the conditioners, and he'll come back with you and go, well, hold on, you said that, but this is actually the case. So don't try to lie. And actually, if it's an instinct thing, be honest about that and go, Allistair, I haven't selected you for the weekend. I've picked John. It's a gut instinct. You're both so tight. I'm not going to tell you that one of you's better in a certain category. It's my instinct that for this weekend against this opposition, I just think he's the right person to start with. And at least you've got a bit more that person will at least, trust you a little bit more. And then give them the tools and support to say, these are the things as well that, I'm going to help you make sure that you continue to get better at. So I think that's where I am with it. I'll be 100% honest. I'll be proactive in having those difficult conversations. I didn't always do that, but I'd say hopefully for the last 10 years plus that's how I've approached things.
Yeah, I think it was something I was listening to Brendan Rodgers, the Leicester manager, who I rate very, very highly. I mean, he's proven that he's a great manager at the clubs he's been with.
And he values culture massively. I was lucky enough to spend some time in there, and weirdly spending most of the time talking about rugby, because one of the assistant coaches is Yaya Touré's brother, Kolo Touré, from the Ivory Coast. Crazy about rugby, and they qualified for the 1987 World Cup, and then their captain broke his neck in one of the games. Wow. And almost overnight that killed the game in the Ivory Coast. No one took it up, and it dived. But weirdly, he I didn't expect him to know everything about rugby. But they really value their values, and I know that they were very careful, and they just moved from their old training ground to their new training ground this season. And their old training ground was good, but the new training ground is amazing. But their old training ground, everyone was together, academy, first team, and it was really one of their strengths as a club. Everybody knew the cleaner and the security guard and the academy kid and everyone else. And they're going to this new facility where it was all separate. And so they were creating different things in their day, different ways to break that physical block down. And I thought that was amazing insight from a manager like Brendan, that he saw the value in that. And even though they were going to these flash shiny things, that's not culture. And so he's then finding ways to navigate around that. So the academy players could still sit down with the first team players after training, and the coaches could mingle, and the security guard would still know everybody. And I thought, they're gonna have a great season.
Yeah, it's amazing just seeing those small things. I mean, you do what I do. We go into environments and assess environments and just pick up those little things. But I'm going to come back to that, because the hard conversations, I think it was Brendan who said, it's easier to have the hard conversations when you have better relationships. And I know it sounds very simple, but the closer you are to the person, the easier it is to have those conversations. And it was just simple advice, but so spot on. But getting back to training environments, as you were just talking about there at Leicester, I think what we're getting away from, and Glasgow Rangers had it as well, where there's more integration, and Liverpool now have it, where the academy players. I think we're getting away from that elitist type of environment. You know what I mean? Where you can't go near the first team, and we had these I think now that's changing.
You'd like to think it is, because those old days where the academy guys have to earn their stripes. Sure, nothing should be handed to someone easily, and they've got to understand the hard work that they need to do to get into the first team. But putting someone into a training session with your first team starter, having a conversation with them over a cup of tea is so valuable for both creating culture, togetherness, but also for the development of that player. And also, I find it really valuable if I'm speaking to a young coach, and I was doing that this week with up in Loughborough. It's reminding me of am I still practicing the basic fundamentals, the stuff I'm telling this young coach, and then I'm listening to their journey at the start, and I'm learning stuff as well. So there's all sorts of, again, go back to that same word, ripple, of being able to integrate things and do things, and you can't put a number on it, but it doesn't mean it's not valuable.
Yeah. Let's look at leadership. What were the qualities you looked for in a captain?
That's a great question. I think you have to have the right captain to fit the group of players, and so there's always that decision to be made on the personalities of the group that you've got and the way you want to play and to operate, and then the captain that would fit that. But the kind of non-negotiables that you want in a captain is that he needs to lead by example, and for me, they also need to have a good moral code, and be open. They need to not be afraid to have difficult conversations. So I need to, again, I've got to develop that relationship with the captain so that they trust me. I know it's become very cool and funky to talk about psychological safety, but I've kind of been banging on about it for almost a decade, really, in different ways, and having that safe conversation so that the captain can really tell me what's going on and how he feels and can feel valued, I think is very important. My best captain I've ever had is the Fijian captain, Allistair, and I think Stengel and Eriksson used this phrase, and I think it's somebody else actually came up with it, the cultural architect. Somebody that is thinking like you, is aligned, and then is also delivering the same stuff that you want as a coach. And the thing with Allistair was that twice in tournaments after the game, he passed out on my shoulder, because he had just absolutely emptied the tank. And in both of those moments, they were not knockout games. We had lost the knockout game, and we'd gone into the plate. And so it was a moment where, a lot of Fijian teams in the past were, well, if you're not going to win the cup, they switched off and they fell away. And so you get points at every game you win. And Fijian teams never would win. Once they lost a quarter final, they would never win that next competition to play because they weren't interested. But they'd lose world titles because they didn't accrue those points when they did fall. And Oscar knew that. He wanted consistency. So his best performances sometimes would be when we'd just lost a game, and the next game was in many ways meaningless as far as the tournament, but he wanted to prove how important it was. And he would not always win the fitness tests, but most of the time. But you could see he expelled every ounce of energy, and he also, he was very humble, and he would he would lead by example as far as putting other people first, and so putting other people first, being consistent in what you're delivering, being safe in having a conversation, and courageous enough to be able to speak to your coaches. To not be a yes man. I'm not a big fan of yes men. I think is important, and maybe I've been a bit too wordy there, Allistair, but it's kind of a number of things.
Leads us to a question that we got here on social media from Michael. Who chooses the captain, the players or the coach?
If you get the players to choose it, you get a popularity contest. And the most popular person probably is captain, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best one. So when I go into a new group, again, I'll look and I'll see who's emerging as natural leaders and have conversations and not have to jump to it. And then we'll make a decision based around that. So I'll speak to the rest of the management about it as well, but I don't think this is, when I talk about agreeing principles around guardrails, I think that's very different to something where you're giving someone a position. I think as a coach, that's one of your roles, and you explain why it's happened, and then you allow them the autonomy, the freedom to have that role. So I'd say coach can make that decision.
Obviously, want to be respectful of your time, but like I said, I could keep you on here all afternoon. A few more questions. We got quite a lot from social media. I won't be able to ask them all, but here's a good one. It's from Andy. Asks, what benefits does Ben think he could bring to Eddie Jones' coaching team, and would he join if approached? Really putting you on the block here.
I think probably look, first, Eddie's obviously got a great track record. He's done really well, and so it's really easy for us from the outside to pick holes in programs where we don't have all the information. I think perhaps if I was to summarise where Eddie could get some value in his staff, it's by having someone there that's willing to question and challenge, and perhaps push things on a creative front. England's got the biggest amount of players in the world. We've got probably arguably the best league in the world now, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be challenging consistently. And I think I would, I'd be there as support and challenge with Eddie. But the second part of it is I don't honestly think my next chapter is in rugby. So, and I don't think Eddie's going to be ringing me. So, that's that.
Okay, you've just disappointed a lot of people.
One person. I don't know. Not many others.
I don't think so. No. Let's see. Let's just take one more question. Jerry asks, how do you find the balance between pushing a player to new heights and asking too much of them?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? Around workload. And I think it goes back to what you said about Brendan Rodgers and that quote that he gave. If you know someone better and you understand someone, then you know when to push and to pull. You know more about their character. You know how you can get more out of them and when you need to ease off. If you have that as well, then I think players can be more honest and they can tell you. I mean, I remember, I've had players where they've said you have a good trust with them and they'll say, look, if I get something wrong, just do this to me and do that to me. And, you don't need to be nice to me in this respect. Or I think that comes from understanding their why, giving them their purpose, building that relationship. I know you talk about the why a lot as well. And it's all really important to build that up. So you know when to push and pull someone. It's like a good relationship. You know where you can where you can kind of push and ask and more from them, and other times where you just need to trust that they're being truthful and you hold back. So it all comes down to knowing your players.
One or two bits of advice for new coaches, younger coaches, somebody that wants to go into coaching. What would be your best piece of advice for them?
The number one thing for me, and thing that put me in most stead as a young coach was coach as much as you can at any level, and make mistakes and try things out and get your hours under your belt. So I remember I'd left professional rugby. I'd gone as, I think they'd call it as a relief teacher in the US, but a supply teacher in London, where I was doing that there, and then I went to coach in a boarding school and teach in a boarding school. I was also coaching a club. I was coaching Oxford University out of 21s. I was coaching Oxfordshire County, and I was doing all of that as well as coaching netball and doing an athletics team. And it doesn't matter if it's other sports, actually. It's all about coaching, and I think teaching are quite similar. But I think it's about volume from a young age, from a young coach's experience, to really hone your philosophy. And, I've never read a rugby coaching manual, but I've read lots of books where you plagiarize little bits. And that includes your books, Allistair, where there's good stuff that you take and you mould to what you're about, and you just become open. I'll be curious would be another thing. It's interesting that I was having this week's been really interesting that I was talking about. I use the rondo drill, which is a Barcelona football drill, which is, it's a football drill really, a football practice. But I use it in rugby, and I've kind of adapted it for passing. And then I was talking about to Angel in boxing, and he's adapted that into the boxing ring to put them under pressure in the corner and different things. And I thought that's showing that he's curious and he's open. And when I was talking to him about his coaching and where he's learning, he talked about beach volleyball, he talked about handball, he talked about Argentinian hockey. And I was like, wow.
Who is this again, Ben?
Angel Fernandez.
Angel Fernandez, okay.
Yeah. Who's one of Anthony Joshua's coaches, and he's just very curious. And so I think adding curiosity to just getting those miles under your belt, I think is really important for a young coach.
Yeah, I've heard Pep Guardiola, for example, has a good friend, Jose Velasco, from also I think Argentinian volleyball as well. I think, and says he learns a lot from him. And we've heard Eddie Jones learns from Belgium hockey, and all these interesting things for me as well. I mean, in my previous life, I was working more with fitness and performance, and had the privilege to work with both the world #1 tennis player and squash player at the same time. And I think what the players really enjoyed was just, they've worked all their lives to get to that point, and it becomes monotonous with the same things and so on. Of course, we know fundamentals are the key to success, but the crossover of what I could learn from squash and bring into tennis and vice versa, without obviously messing up anything with regards to technique or whatever, which we know is sacred at that level, really helped. So, like you said, stay curious. One of the key success points of Mercedes-Benz Petronas, the Formula One team, is, Toto Wolff talks about skepticism, staying skeptical,
right.
Asking questions all the time. And I think, I worked with a player between 2014 and 2018, Kevin Anderson, who reached number 5 in the world in tennis and reached 2 Grand Slam finals.
Great player.
Yeah, and I would not have been able to work with him 10 years ago, because Kevin is skeptical. Kevin asks a lot of questions. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Has a memory of every drill, rep, number that you can, and he would challenge me. And I would not have been able to handle that 10 years ago, where I would have been like, why does this guy keep asking me questions and stuff? He made me a better coach by making sure I knew what the purpose was to everything I was doing.
I love that. It's something I'm quite a big believer in, that the star players, if you can handle a star player well, those top performers that are prepared to ask you questions and stuff, and that filters the great coaches. And I'm a big believer that I think sometimes coaches can, particularly in team sports, they cannot deal well with those star players. And I think the number one reason that they can't deal with them very well is because actually somewhere subconsciously they realise that player might actually know more than them. And that ego then, which that would be a whole new show talking about the ego.
Yeah.
That ego then pops up and makes some poor decisions as a coach. And so those players, I was speaking to Matt Little, who's fitness coach for Andy Murray, and Andy Murray's exactly the same. He's going to question all the things that you're doing and making sure that what he's doing is going to make a difference. So Matt's on his mettle, and he knows that, but it's making him better every day as a result of that. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with feeling uncomfortable, right? As a coach, you don't want a group of yes people, because you'll get mediocrity. But
I think it comes down to maturity as well. And like you said there, the big word being ego. Which you spoke about in one of your podcasts as well, is I just wouldn't have been mature, even though it was 10 years, maybe 10, 15 years, I just wouldn't have been equipped to deal with that. I would have been challenged. Like I said, it actually, he made me redefine my 5 key points in my philosophy, which I'll share with you now. And I'm sorry if I'm stealing time with you, but we're going to...
No, not at all. No, this is all golden.
We're going to have part 2 of this for sure, but it was, him being challenging to me, that redefined my philosophy, which I'll share with you happily here and the listeners. Number 1, have a defined purpose to everything you do, and Kevin definitely pushed me for that, because why did we do 12 last week and we're doing 10 this week? And you'd have to know why. Number 2, build and nurture relationships, which is a massive one for you. Number 3, lead by example. Number 4, open and honest culture. And number 5, appreciate others. Those are my 5 my philosophy, which probably 10 years ago would have looked nothing like that.
It is interesting. I think I'd have similar. And it's a great exercise actually for every coach to think about that, isn't it? And do what and have those, because I'm sure it just drives your daily behaviours. But I think probably one of the reasons is I wouldn't actually know that it was my ego making some of these decisions. And it actually, you think about some of the stuff that you've done as a young coach, you go, oh my good Lord, and I've seen it even with elite coaches. You see it all the time. Stress comes on, and ego pops up. And if you don't have the tools, or you don't have the group around you that can tap you on the shoulder and go, Ben, mate, this is not your best version at the moment. Take a breath. And you don't snap at them, and you do take a breath, and you do realise it's a real tricky art, though, isn't it? Because I think for anyone to say, their ego's under control, it's like, man, no, you've got to pay attention to it all the time, and have people around that know you well enough to be able to point things out, and when that ego's creeping around the corner. Martin Bouchette, who's a PSG, who I know you know well, he's just written a book about ego.
Yes.
That would be a great read, because I think every coach needs to prioritise understanding their own ego and about those that they work with, to understand what where their decisions are coming from, and how people are acting in certain situations.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that book. I contributed a little bit as well on that, and
Brilliant.
Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic idea by Martin. I really can't wait for that. And thanks to Martin, obviously we met as well. So no, this has been an awesome conversation, Ben. Like I said, there has to be part 2 of this. We could just share so much experiences and stories.
I'd love to go into an organisation, the two of us, to see where we come at it from, because I think we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways, and you must add some great value to places, and I love listening to all the stuff you do as well. So thanks for helping me to get better and learn. No,
likewise. Like I said, when I came across your podcast, I binge watched it like I binge watch Drive to Survive, like just within 3 days, and I'm disappointed. I'm still waiting for season 4.
No, we got the next season's out in July, I think.
In July, yes. I'm just going to have to wait for that. So, Ben, if anybody out there wants to get in touch with you or follow you on social media, obviously we know we have your podcast, the Ben Ryan Podcast. What's the best way?
Well, thanks. I mean, the website, benryan.co.uk, you can contact through there. And then, I'm on Instagram, Ben Ryan 7's. But the Ben Ryan Podcast, is a good listen. And the book, I'm really proud of the book. I think it's a good tool for coaches called 7's Heaven, and we're very fortunate that it's being turned into a film. And so,
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Is it?
So the script's just been finished. So it's and it's loosely based on the film, actually.
Are you in it?
But there'll be someone that will play me. Yeah, some poor soul that will have to try and deliver some very corny lines, probably. But it'll be a feel good, and actually it will reveal a lot of things that perhaps people didn't know about the story, and it's more about. I've always said that my story in the book and everything else is not about rugby, it's about people. It's about me becoming a much better version of myself, having spent 3 years in Fiji, and my relationship with my manager and my players, and, putting people first, which perhaps is fairly relevant at this moment in time as well.
Awesome stuff. Ben, thanks so much for your time, and good luck with everything. Good luck with the podcast.
No, I really hope so too, Allistair. Have a lovely weekend.
Cheers. Thanks, Ben.
Yes. See you, mate.
So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one with Ben Ryan as much as I did. Really, really fascinating story, background, and a man with a wealth of experience. Remember to check him out on social media. He's on Instagram, Ben Ryan 7's. He's on Twitter, Benjamin Ryan. And of course, check out his podcast, as I mentioned, the Ben Ryan Podcast. As always, this podcast is available on iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, and via my website, allistairmccaw.com. Please share this episode if you enjoyed it. And also remember to give the show a rating or review on iTunes. So, as always, remember you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion-minded.